Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Ascendle Unscripted. Today, I have veteran Ascendle Unscripted speaker, Susannah Parnin Mitchell, VP of Operations at Ascendle. We'd also like to welcome first-timer Jacki Brown. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Absolutely. We'll do a short intro with you, Jacki. I just want to open up with the episode theme. In this episode, we're going to talk about why positioning and go-to-market strategy must be baked into product development from the start, and how marketing and product teams must truly collaborate to deliver real business value. Heads of product, digital strategy leaders, CTOs, especially those responsible for launching or modernizing digital products in complex organizations, you will likely find this episode particularly relevant. Jacki, I would love to ask you, what do you think our Ascendle Unscripted audience should know about you?
Well, I like to say that I'm a marketer by trade. So I've been doing this for about 20 years. And honestly, most of that has been on the B2C side. So with brands like Nexus Hair Care, Nugo Nutrition Bars, Ninja Blenders, and Shark Vacuums, rather. Shark Ninja, same company. Very few people seem to know that. And then I had pivoted over to the B2C side and really in the tech space. And I've been here for the last 8 years and now had been full-time for 7. And in the last year, I'm now consulting and working with some smaller tech startups to bring the same type of strategy and go-to-market concepts to life in these smaller organizations.
Jacki, thank you very much for that. Right off the bat, where I wanted to dive in was what happens when we bring in marketing too late. And it sounds like working with startups, there's a real opportunity to not do that. So I'd love to hear about that. And then also love to hear, in general, your purview, what does happen when marketing is not something that's considered on the front end? What can go wrong?
So what I've come across quite a lot, especially in the last year, is marketing is an afterthought. A lot of times, tech companies, they're started by a salesperson and a product person or a tech person. That's the core group. And those initial sales seem to happen through relationships. And really, they continue on for quite some time, relationship focused. And it's not until they hit a plateau of some sort that they realize, oh, maybe we should bring in marketing. And that could be after having 20 employees. It could be, I've had a client who they've been around for 30 years and decided to now bring on someone from marketing. Boggles my mind because I, of course, am biased. I think marketing is really, really critical. But the piece that I think that we're talking about today is so important is this idea of positioning and really doing the research to figure out how do you make sure that you are uniquely positioned in your market and messaging that in a way that resonates with your buyer. And I think it's very difficult to do that if you don't have the experience having done that before or someone giving you that guidance.
Yeah, Jacki, thank you for that. Susannah, thinking of not baking it in, so to speak. And then also thinking about not the end user, which seems kind of strange to me when you're thinking of a product or something you're going to sell, thinking of like, well, this is the problem we're going to solve, but not really connecting it to how this is going to go out into the world and market it. Do you have any thoughts around, the myth of the handoff, so to speak?
Yeah, and I can echo a little bit of what Jacki was saying. Lots of times companies, they think of marketing as an afterthought or, just the activities that happen when you're ready to start talking about it, which positioning is, of course, a big piece of that. But marketing is actually involved in the very beginning too, and which is why, we're chatting today, because I think that should not just be market understanding, but actually people who are great at understanding the market. And what I mean by that is if you don't bring in market expertise, and by that I mean knowing who your customers are, knowing how to segment them, understanding who you're going to go to first, how you're going to penetrate that market. If you don't start with that, then you can't even really build a valid business case or ROI hypothesis for your product, right? Because you have to be thinking about not just what you're building, but who you're building it for. Not just the described end user, but the actual market. You have to enumerate that.
What would you say is the difference? Oh, please, Jacki, please jump in.
Oh, it was so well said, Susannah. I completely agree. And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Susannah, you said the end market versus the user, or there was like kind of two separate groups there. Could you make a distinction between those two?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I articulated that great. When I say the end user, I'm thinking about the person doing the clicking, right? So, of course, the product experts are always thinking about that person, what they need, what features would resonate with them. When I say thinking about the market, I'm talking about the groups of those people, however you categorize those, that you will be selling to or trying to get this into the hands of. So, I'm thinking along the terms of what's your total addressable market, of that market, where do you want to start? Is it, for example, North America? Say you're a global company, you have products all over the world, you're trying to launch a new product. What I'm talking about is thinking about how you're going to do that in terms of your market. So segmentation as part of your planning and go-to-market strategy is what I was referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Jacki, I feel like you have a thought.
Yes. And I always think of marketing is talking to the buyer, and the product group is talking to the user. But everyone in the organization should understand that total addressable market and the attainable market, right? What is our share of the market that we think we can really address their needs?
That's a great distinction, Jacki. That one I truthfully haven't heard very often. The distinction between addressable and attainable. Can you maybe just talk a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So the addressable is who are all of the people, but attainable is the difference of who will actually purchase. Who do we think we can convert? And in my mind, that is with our current solution. And maybe if we make XYZ changes, now we open up that market to another audience, right? So it's really in this moment with these features and this distinction and this competitive set and their current everything in the moment, what is attainable for us?
Got it. We are certainly going to move to what looks great and how to do this well. Before we do that, maybe we can talk about something that is not well, like something like an undercooked launch or an issue that came up not working out of this mindset.
Ooh.
Jacki, you want to go first?
All right. Yeah. So I know we all have these stories that have been buried, right? The one that comes to mind, and it really pained me, was all of a sudden one of my team members. So I was leading a marketing team, primarily product marketers at the time. One of them came to me and said, "Hey, so and so just told me they need a sales deck to present in 2 days to this team on this topic." I thought, well, I know nothing about that product. So that's a problem because that means we haven't done any positioning. We don't know what the messaging is. And they're coming to the sales team just at the same time they're coming to the marketing team. And so at the time, product marketing sat under marketing. Sometimes that sits under product. So that could change depending on your organization. But I started asking more questions and said, well, do we have a positioning for this? In this case, we were offering a joint solution with another company. So it was an integration, but it was a joint solution. So, okay, so what's the positioning? And I didn't really get an answer. And then I said, okay, well, how are we selling it? So what sales team is it going to if we get a lead? And I couldn't get an answer. And then it's, okay, well, how are we pricing this? And I couldn't get an answer. And I thought, oh my goodness, you're going to give this to the sales team in 2 days and you haven't addressed any of this. I mean, the sales team, the second you tell a salesperson about something, they're going to sell it the next day. So you have to be prepared. And so fast forward, start asking all these questions. They ended up never going live with that offering because once they started thinking through the packaging, the pricing, the positioning, it actually didn't make sense and did not have the value that they wanted in the market. So really it's that doing that due diligence is so important. Asking those questions, even if I had to be the bad guy in the moment, I'm so glad I did, because I think it saved a lot of headaches down the road.
Jacki, thank you for that. Susannah, do you have a weigh in on this one?
Yeah, I think we all have some, war stories here for having experienced some of this. I was listening to Jacki and I was thinking about a similar project I was adjacent to. I wasn't actually on it, that suffered a similar fate. The developers had built this beautiful new version of what was an on-premise kind of antiquated solution. It was redone. It was pretty. It was cloud-based, so modern technologies, etc. But that upfront thinking that Jacki was just describing, that what additional value does this give to our existing customers who are already using it and who will have to invest to move over to a new version? What value are they getting from it? And the project came to a slow down halt because that hadn't been thought through, and there wasn't enough of a value prop to make up for the cost of change for this. So back to the drawing board, back to additional features that would actually build in enough value to make the current customers jump over.
Jacki, you were just talking about questions, relevant, important questions that never got asked. And one of the things that continues to be a theme here on Ascendle Unscripted are, what are the most effective questions to ask at what point in time? There are questions in the beginning, middle, and end of any process. So I know this is key here, and we're going to get to this in a moment. We're going to talk big on questions. Before we do that, I would love to ask, why do so many companies get positioning wrong? Is it just the questions, or is there something else going on there?
So I do think it does come back to the questions, but there's certain elements in my mind to positioning. And so the first is understanding who your target audience is, because you can only figure out your positioning and messaging if you know what those people want. What are their challenges? What I see a lot of companies doing is saying, well, everyone's my target audience. Mm-hmm. And so what does that do? That completely muddles your messaging. And because what is then valuable to them? Everybody, then you start putting everything in. The kitchen sink is in your message. It really becomes very vague what you do. And I always come back to, someone needs to understand who you are right away when they go to your webpage. Those first couple lines, to me, that is the epitome of your positioning and messaging. And so that's where you see it get muddled, right? So I think that is really the first piece, is not understanding your audience enough, making it clear enough, putting everything all in. But then I also am seeing a lot of people saying, well, our message is that we're the number one, or we're the best, or we're the only. And again, that's not positioning. It doesn't really tell your customer, your prospect, anything. It just says we're the only AI-powered booking engine. Okay. What do I get from that, right? And that's where you really need to be talking about the value. So that's where I see organizations having challenges with positioning.
Susannah, I feel like you have something to say on this. Thank you, Jacki.
Yeah, I'm going back to something Jacki said earlier, where you really need some experts and some marketing knowledge and know-how to get the positioning right. I think there are a lot of companies, probably the ones that you're talking about, that end up with those just taglines that are a little bit meaningless, that where the positioning is coming from the product, or they don't have that separate lens. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a trap there, right? There's a trap of having the people talking about the product being so hyper familiar with the day-to-day and ins and outs that they already have this inherent understanding. And I think when you have that view and that lens, it's hard to describe it to folks that don't know about it, which is why I think that balance of product marketing and product strategy is so important.
Yeah. And I'll say, Susannah, I am now, as a consultant, doing my own positioning for my own company. And it is wild how much harder that is to do it for yourself. I have so much compassion now for the people I work with or have worked with, because you look at what you can do and you think, well, I could do so many things.
Yep.
I could do all the way stuff over here and all the way over here. And well, I don't want to narrow down. What if someone wants that? And I think it's human nature. You need to sit down and have someone like a marketing therapist sit with you and say, but what can you do the best? What can no one else do? Can you make money with that? And really hone in on it. And it's really, really hard to do for yourself. I now say, as someone who does this professionally and has done it for 30 products, and I feel like you just need someone who's done it before and knows how to get past that and get people to figure out what they really do the best.
So I completely agree. For some reason, like you're saying, I wish I could give a reason right now why that is. I just know that we all have our blind spots that we cannot see. And, it's like, I forget the analogy, but the shoemaker's shoes, you go to the person who makes shoes, their shoes are, just can't do it. So going back, this is even more reason, it sounds like, to have marketing in the beginning as asking those questions, like as an oversight. And then also if you bring things in too late, it can be a lot harder to steer the ship, because you gave that in a different direction, or the direction you need to go, because there's momentum and money and time spent. So what are the first questions? Susannah, I'll go to you, then Jacki. Would love to hear both of you on this. What are the first questions that product leaders should ask when defining positioning?
I think when you're a product leader and you're trying to figure out the positioning, or trying to inform marketing of how to start working on the positioning, if we're going with the recommendation of having that other lens, you need to be asking the questions of, what market am I going into? How do I define that market? Is this a North American market segmented to a certain age group that is in this position of their thinking? And I'm actually not great at segmenting markets, so probably Jacki can do better at that. But getting really narrow with who you are targeting. That's not to say it can't change as your product evolves and you grow to reach new markets, but as you're entering the market, being very targeted for that and asking those questions. Who am I trying to sell this to? At what rate do I think I can penetrate it, right? How many current customers can we convert? How many new customers do we think we're going to be able to get? What is the value to them? Setting that pricing. I think that those are the important product strategy questions to ask first through the lens of marketing, because that's the basis for why you're going to do what you're doing. And the premise of your whole business case is being able to get into a particular market at a particular rate to solve a particular problem that people will pay a particular price for.
Jacki, how about you? What are those questions?
So I now do positioning on a one-page template. You have to fit everything into that one page. There's no marketing messaging around it. There's no fluff. Sometimes I do a draft of it. Sometimes I do a draft with the product strategist. I just did that, and that worked really nicely. And then all of leadership, whoever that is, if it's founders, head of product, sales, service, ops, all get in one meeting in one room and hash it out. And there's 5 different sections. The first one is, what market category are we in? At some point, you need to define what market category you're in, because you need to use common language that people are searching for. I see a lot of companies don't want to define a market category. Well, we're beyond that. We're inventing something completely new. And To be fair, some are, but most aren't, or they're doing a new version of something that people are already searching for. So your market category, who is your competition? And that's both tech versions as well as what's the manual process that people are currently using, because again, that's going to inform how I talk about this. If someone is primarily doing this manually, well, that's a very big different message than if you're converting someone from a different technology. Then there's all of the segmentation that Susannah was talking about. Who is your ideal customer persona or profile, whatever, however you want to say ICP? And I do things like geography, titles, if it's a certain title within an organization you're trying to target, size of an organization, what budget, are they using certain technology? Do they need something specific in order to use this? Or is that more ideal, right, for that relationship? And then what are our distinct features that we have compared to the competition? And when you consider all four of those other things, what unique value does that deliver? And generally, you're looking at 3 to 5 items for your unique value. This has been working really well.
There's another benefit to all of this that I want to make sure we touch on before we move on, Michael, which is it doesn't just help you shape, what you're going to say. Getting a really clear picture of, where in the market you're going and going after, if you will, it can also impact the prioritization and the features that need to be done, which is one of the biggest reasons to do this work up front, not just to avoid the mistakes that we were talking about, but to also be able to put that lens on what do we really need to get to that particular user group, right? So, back to my earlier example, say you're a global company, you want to launch your product across the globe. Well, maybe you don't start everywhere with everybody. Maybe you target just the, English speaking areas, which means you can take internationalization off the table of your MVP and get that first version of your product to market faster and start realizing revenue, and then add the other markets and their particular needs incrementally. So that's another piece where marketing can help is, which market is ready now and what features do they need? And then you can grow from there. And that should be part of the product strategy.
Well, Susannah, this sounds like a question that I was going to ask a little further on about how can we help engineering teams to see that marketing isn't just promotion, it's an essential context. And what I'm hearing here, and please, of course, as always, correct me if I'm wrong, knowing what you're going to know from marketing is going to possibly inform in some way or maybe a very direct way, what should we be working on right now as far as features?
Yeah, absolutely. I think identifying that, ideal customer profile and then adding in the segmentation of your entry plan, or the entry plan based on your segmentation, rather, that will help you stack rank what work you need to do now versus what can be delayed.
I also think a lot of people think of marketing as just the paid advertising aspect, where you are dumping money into these paid ads and they're following you all over the internet everywhere you go. And quite frankly, I'm seeing a lot of B2B companies really pull back from any paid advertising because they're not seeing the return and value from it and using other elements. So thinking of it that way is not great. But I always like to say you could put $500,000 into paid advertising if you don't have the right research to understand your audience that created the positioning and messaging. You're basically flushing it down the drain because that message isn't going to resonate.
So you've really helped me come to something here. If you both, either of you know Edwin Land, the inventor of Polaroid and the inventor of many, many things, this guy was a genius. And one of my favorite quotes from him is, marketing is what you do when your product isn't any good. Now he's saying this because with his instant camera, he said, come down to the department store at 5 o'clock. and he would take the instant camera, and never before in the history of mankind, literally, could you take a photo and have him go shake it like this and go, here you go. People were in awe. He sold them for wherever he wanted to sell them for. He was out of them in 5 minutes because he was able to show. But what I'm hearing right now, especially in this era, marketing isn't what you do when your product is any good. Marketing is what you do so that your product will be good.
Mm-hmm. I think that's part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting the right information, the research input, and then we are just in a very different world than when Polaroid came out, right? There's so
100%.
much
Yeah.
more information around you. And I think so. When I think of the client who didn't have marketing for 30 or 8 years, or it's because their product was so good and they were known in the space.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still so much competition for not just products, but our attention, that at least your owned channels, so your website, your LinkedIn, need to very clearly communicate what you do and how you do it differently.
I want to talk about AI because we have to talk about AI. Jacki, I want to before we do that, from both of you, attention. One of the things that I do consider is that the idea that you're going to capture someone's attention now, and the effort that it's going to take to do that. You have to think about it. You're going to have to remove their attention from one thing, and they're going to have to believe that the attention they were spending on A is B is now more worthy of my attention.
Mm-hmm.
So, and your really good point of like, well, Edwin Land walked into a department store. There was no internet. He held the camera. I mean, there's 20 people there, right? It's like you had them there. Like, you had a captive audience.
Yeah.
But now, what is it like? How does one start to think about how to capture attention? What does that look like? It seems like it's getting harder and harder to do that for organizations that cannot afford $100 million of marketing. I mean, like movies nowadays, they cost 200 million to make and then 400 million dollars to market, which is insane. That's nuts. It's double the marketing budget for the movie, otherwise no one's going to see it. So what have you seen an evolution of attention? Are there some things that organizations should be thinking about on how to efficiently connect meaningfully to capture that attention?
I always go back to thought leadership.
Hmm.
And I think that the companies who they've done their research, and that research goes into their product as well as their thought leadership content. They have a point of view. They understand the challenge that's going on with their buyers, and they really provide valuable insights and information and helpful tips on how to tackle that challenge, not using their product, but within the broader sphere of that problem. To me, that is how you establish your credibility, you build that trust, and when people are ready to buy, that's when they come to you. Now, you're talking about AI. AI means anybody can create content, right? So it's even harder to create content and capture attention. And so that means that you really have to have a unique point of view. You have to have really had a conversation. And that's what I'm doing now with my clients. I'm doing interviews. I'm really trying to capture the founders and why did they try to create this product to begin with? Why do they see this challenge? And I will tell you, the people they're geniuses. And I'm just trying to translate what is in their brain to the world and help bring that to life, because only 10% of people are actually in the market at any given time. And so it's all about continuing to create content, and whether that's on LinkedIn, whether it's in your industry publications, if you can get spots for speaking at events, but keeping up a regular cadence of providing valuable information, to me, that's the way to go.
The AI stamp of approval, AI included. Like I remember Intel Inside, all right? AI Inside said every website now that you go to, whether doesn't matter, we use AI. Is there a danger, or what is the danger of quote like AI washing your message and just throwing the AI message in there and be like, we use AI,
I think there's definitely a danger, but I'll start by answering a little bit differently, Michael. I
please?
think it's really appealing for companies to stick AI on their outfront messaging, because I think it is really worrisome for a lot of companies right now how they're going to stay relevant in this changing industry. I mean, AI is evolving so fast, certainly faster than companies, certainly the larger, slower moving companies can understand, ideate, integrate, and launch AI solutions. So sticking it on your website is really appealing, I think, for that reason. So you at least can start saying, I'm paying attention, we're still relevant, we're not going to be outcompeted in this industry. There's obviously danger there, right? Because if that's not real and your users don't understand the value they're getting from how your product is leveraging AI, then you're going to diminish your brand. And there's an education piece too, which goes back to the positioning. It's not just about saying AI enabled or just throwing that word out there. You really have to kind of teach right now your audience what the AI is actually doing in your product. And that's assuming that it's true that your product is leveraging AI.
Well, I'm hearing this goes right to Jacki's earlier point on thought leadership. There is this education piece I hear, Susannah, that you're talking about, where it's like, yes, there is AI inside, but let me break down for you what the result is, what we do, how this comes in, and how all these things come together. So there is this, it sounds like a thought leadership piece around AI. Jacki, do you have thoughts around AI washing or showing clients value instead of the AI buzzword kind of thing, and when it can go well and when it can maybe not go so well?
I have so many thoughts, Michael.
Please. Please.
So, Susannah, as you were talking, it actually made me think what I'm hearing from buyers is the user doesn't necessarily care if there's AI, but they are being asked by their leadership how they are going to be using AI at their organization. They're being charged with finding AI tools that are going to help them be competitive. And so the leadership is saying, we know AI is a thing. We know we need to be more efficient. We know we need to be using it. Figure out and go get some AI stuff. That's what I'm hearing about our buyers, which I think is fascinating, which even more so means companies just want to put that AI stamp of approval. Funny enough, I have had a few companies, clients of mine, that really are built with AI, using AI. They are cutting edge. They don't want to talk about it at all because they feel like everybody is putting this AI stamp of approval and they want to talk about the value that they're delivering. They don't want it to seem like it's fake. They feel like AI is being splashed everywhere and it is diminishing compared to what they're delivering. Their perspective is if you really see the product and you see what it's doing, you'll know that it's AI doing it because it is so much more optimized or advanced or in different ways. So I am fascinated by it. I personally, and I had a LinkedIn debate about this with the product marketers of the world, I like the term AI powered when you were talking about your market category. So we talked about market category earlier. I said you have to say if you're a CRM. If you are an AI-powered CRM, to me, I like it. I think that's a descriptive term. It's very clear, but that should not be your headline. You should not say we're the only AI-powered CRM. People are going to say, cool, what does that do for me? You should be still leading with all of your value and then following with, oh, and by the way, we are this. That's my perspective. I will tell you, it was a heated LinkedIn debate, and the other product marketers are not a fan of using AI powered and only talking about the value you're delivering. But to me, I think at some point you need to say what it is you actually do. And that's where that can fall in.
Well, it's a really clear distinction between the what and the how. Right? The what
Exactly.
is, here's the value we deliver. Here are these solutions. This is the result, which is the what. And then the how,
Exactly.
yeah.
I can see the other side though, where, you know, people are being pressured to find tools, upgrade the way that they're working, etc. So you might be filtered out if you're not putting that language in there, especially if you are really an AI powered product.
Mm-hmm.
So what should people do? What should companies do? Case by case, it
Listen
depends.
to a marketing expert.
I feel like Jacki, you have weighed in on this. That AI, like AI
Yeah.
powered X, is
Yeah.
some yes, but letting people know a little bit of the how, but mostly leaning into what it is we do. You
Yeah.
feel
And why we do it. Yes.
got it. I want to come back to thought leadership before we close, but before we do, we always love actionable insights on Ascendle Unscripted. To send the audience away with something they can really put into play, immediately, if not in the very, very near future. So, what questions should leaders be asking their product marketing teams right now, you think, Jacki?
So I think you're lucky if you have a product marketing team.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, not everyone has that. Not even everyone has that skill set. So whether you have someone leading up your marketing or your sales and marketing, or they're your CRO, I would start by saying, do we have and can I see the latest version of our positioning and messaging documents? By the way, those are internal and are not the things that you actually post out. They're just like Word documents or something. But that is what I think you should start with. Take a look at it. Do they really, then asking yourself, do those show our distinct value that we're delivering? Have we looked at it recently? Has our competition changed? And I do think it's something you need to look at least every year. And if you have a more quickly evolving competitive set or market, it's even more frequent than that. You need to always be keeping an eye on your competition to make sure that you are really talking about your unique value.
I was going to ask what the pacing was. You've already addressed that. It depends, but yeah, as I was going to ask, quarterly, yearly, etc. But in a lot of fast moving industries, it sounds like as soon as somebody new comes onto the scene who could be a direct competitor, it might not hurt to just take a review of that. Gotcha. Susannah, questions leaders should be asking right now, you think, around product/marketing?
Yeah, I think that before you launch a new product, or before you even start going down the path of building a new product, you should be asking, what is our target market? How big is it? Can we really get into it? What will people pay for this? Again, like Jacki said, what's our competition? What are people paying for our competition? You have to be asking those questions first, well before you write any line of code, and definitely before you articulate what you're building and in what priority order.
Is there anything that either of you would like to share? Thoughts or guidance for someone launching a new product this quarter, or anything that you want to impart that we may not have covered on this episode?
So something we haven't covered, but that I think is so core to everything we're talking about is, do you have a go-to-market team? Or a release to market? There's so many different names you could call it, but do you have a cross-functional team that meets to actually say, are we operationally ready? I have a big pet peeve that you are not ready to launch when the product is done. When the QA is done, you are not ready to launch yet. You need to make sure that operationally, your customer service, your sales, your marketing, finance, contracts, everybody else needs to be part of that conversation, and everybody really needs to give their stamp. And I think, when Susannah and I shared our pain points earlier, it was because those types of meetings were not happening. And so those conversations were missed.
Got it. So the often overlooked, can we start to serve the people that are going to sign up for this thing? And do we have all of our, areas covered? The vision you're giving me is like, in NASA, where they're like, go for flight. Like,
Yeah.
you're right. Like radio, go for flight, help, go for flight. So it sounds like you really have to do this go for flight check across the board in the organization to make sure that everybody's go for flight without leaving something out. And you get out there with a product and accounting's like, oh, we had no, we're not ready. We need like 6 more weeks to get things together. And you're like, oh, well, we told everybody a month. Oh, darn. Okay. All right. Love to go for flight.
Yeah.
Susannah.
Fun fact, this particular problem is how Jacki and I actually know each other, because we were able to work together and manage some products, the go-to-market process. And at the time we called it the release team, getting together, talking about it, not just saying, yes, we're ready for flight, but further up the line, defining what those things were that needed to be done to be ready to launch, if you will. So I'm very passionate about this as well, and was nodding along when Jacki was saying it, because I was like, yes, that was the one thing I was also going to bring up that we need to cover. It's this idea that you need the plan up front for how you're going to actually realize your value, because you don't realize your value, as Jacki said, when the product is done, when QA is done, when it's in and ready to, even when it's in production. You don't realize your value until it's in a customer's hands being used. So all of the work that's needed to get to that point needs to be considered up front and met on regularly, so that you can shorten that time between, all right, this looks good, and a customer is actually using it. You can do all that work in parallel.
Thank you
Agreed.
both. Yeah, thank you to our audience for always tuning in. Ascendle Unscripted is available on all major platforms. Until next time, Jacki, thank you so much for joining us. It was wonderful to have you. Susannah, as always, a pleasure. Susannah, as always, great to see you and collaborate with you. Until next time, this is Ascendle Unscripted.